Choices, choices, choices. GTFO has presented us with many of those throughout the rundowns, some on the simpler side, and others being a bit more complicated to come to a decision. Today's level consists of a few choices we'll have to make along the way. One being, do we take the easy route early on, but make things a little more challenging for us later in the mission as a result? Or do we push ourselves to the brink of defeat early on in order to greatly benefit us later? Hello everyone, Professor Scaly here, and welcome to the R8B3 level guide. As always, we're starting off with the recommended loadout, and for this mission, I always like to bring in with me a bio tracker and 3 burst sentries. Reason for the bio tracker is the same as always, being able to gather information with it, and also tagging enemies in the darkness, the fog, or whatever environment you find you and your teammates in. The 3 burst sentries, though, on the other hand, I like bringing these in specifically because even though mines and CFOM are quite helpful for this level, they fall off incredibly hard for the very first class 1 sustained alarm you have to make your way through. Or at least they do if you do the extreme version of it. Because there's no doors anywhere you'll be able to shut, mine, and CFOM for that alarm. And it's quite difficult since it's going to be pretty much nothing but chargers and hybrids that spawn in during it, and it's going to last for about 2.5 minutes. And going through that alarm with only 1 or 2 sentries can put you in a bit of a tight spot if you aren't really efficient with your ammunition. So having 3 sentries instead helps out tremendously for that alarm, and also it helps out for the rest of the level as there's really never a point where sentries are going to fall off. There are also a fair amount of explosive trip mines you can find in this level in certain portions of it, so those can easily replace a mine deployer. And the reason I like to go for burst sentries is just because decent rate of fire, they work out in almost every situation. Sometimes I will replace 1 or even 2 of them with a sniper sentry, as there are a fair amount of chargers in this level, and sniper sentries are a bit better than burst sentries at dealing with them. But in some of those situations, you will have a very short sight line between you and the enemies, so even with Biotracker Symbiosis, sometimes the sniper sentries just can't really keep up, and it's just better to have burst sentries instead. But if you want to replace 1 or even 2 of them with sniper sentries, by all means go on ahead, you should still be able to find success. Dropping down into level, you'll see that your main objective is to start the contamination exercise, which is always done via the terminal inside zone 117. Meanwhile, you and your teammates will be starting off inside zone 108. Now, in this zone, there are no enemies or resources for you to collect whatsoever, so just go on ahead and go to the western side of it, where you'll find a security door to zone 109, which is going to have a full team scan tied to it. Zone 109, this is all one big open room. Throughout it, there's going to be 2 scouts patrolling about, a fair amount of regular strikers and shooters, as well as resources, 1 power cell, and 3 different generators, each one having its own security door tied to it. Now, you've only got 1 power cell, so you can only open up 1 of these 3 different zones, and each one of them have a way for you to deal with the infectious fog in the level. If you go to the security door to zone 110, you'll be getting a fair amount of fog repellers in there. The security door to zone 111 will be giving you a fog turbine, and zone 112, that is going to give you a terminal that you can use to purify all the infectious fog in the level. And each one of these security doors have their own challenges tied to them. So, for the purpose of this guide, I will explain every single one of them, even though I always recommend you go into zone 112. So, if you and your teammates decide to go for zone 110, the one with the fog repellers in it, you're going to have to deal with a class 1 sustained alarm moderate version, which is only going to be spawning in regular strikers and shooters and will take about 35 seconds to complete the scan. If you go for zone 111, you're dealing with a class 1 sustained alarm strong edition, which is going to be spawning in mostly regular strikers and shooters, as well as a fair amount of chargers here and there, and that scan is going to take 100 seconds to complete. If you go for zone 112 though, the one for the terminal, you're going to deal with a class 1 sustained alarm extreme edition, which is going to be spawning in pretty much nothing but regular chargers, as well as a few hybrids here and there, and it's going to take 150 seconds to complete the scan. Now, no matter which one of the ones you go for, your setup is going to be the same. As you can see with the map overlay, there's only 1 possible spawn location for these enemies, and there's no doors we can utilize whatsoever, but that's fine, we have 3 sentries. As you can kind of see in the background footage, we have our sentry set up in a few different locations in the room. In this run, I don't think we actually did run 3 sentries, although I could be wrong. I actually haven't looked at the footage for a while. But setting them up, the real important thing is just make sure that as enemies are coming into the room and coming down each of those ramps to you, the sentries will have clear line of sight and be able to shoot them and not accidentally shoot you in the back of the head. If you go for the extreme alarm, which is the one I recommend you go for, you're going to want to be very careful because those hybrids can very easily beam you down while you're out in the open. So whoever has the best long range weapon to deal with them, once they show up, get rid of them quickly. Once you finish either of the 3 alarms you go for, you're just going to head into the zone. All 3 of them are fairly similar. Fair amount of regular strikers and shooters, as well as a few giant strikers here and there. And you're just going to go around, grab resources, and then either get the fog repellers if you went for 110, the fog turbine if you went for 111, or you're going to go for the terminal and put a special command into it, which will purify all the infectious fog. Once you've gotten everything you need though from the zone you went into, you're going to go back out to zone 108, this time go to the eastern side of it, and there you'll find a security door to zone 113. This door is just going to have a full team scan tied to it, and in zone 113, a few different rooms you're going to have to go through with a fair amount of regular strikers and shooters. It's going to be fairly foggy throughout here, so if you did not purify the fog, you're going to have to use fog repellers or the fog turbine to traverse through here safely, but be careful because there is a scout patrolling about in one of the rooms. Now, at the far back end of zone 113, you'll find a security door to zone 114, which is going to have a class 4 mixed alarm tied to it. Now, as you can see with this map overlay, there are 2 different locations enemies could possibly spawn from, and throughout this alarm, you're going to get sort of a 50-50 mix of regular strikers and shooters, as well as regular chargers. So my recommendation is have all of the doors I've highlighted shut. If you do happen to come across an explosive trip mine, go on ahead and mine the door that leads into your room. If not, then go on ahead, keep it shut anyway. Then just have your 3 sentries somewhere in the room facing towards the direction enemies will come from. That way, after they break down the door, the sentries are there to shoot at them. Normally, I would say leave the door open so the enemies funnel in and they don't come in as a large horde since you are running triple sentries, but there's a lot of distance between you and your teammates where you'll be doing the scans and that final door into your room, so it's not that big of a deal if you do happen to keep it shut. Now, inside the zone, there will be a little bit more fog here and there. You're actually going to be able to find some fog repellers. So if you did not purify the fog, don't worry. You've got repellers in here you can use. There's also some disinfectant packs in here along with the resources. So if you did gain some infection, you can remove some of it. And of course, there will also be that terminal, which once you find it, there's a special command you can put into it, which once you do, full team scan is going to appear. And once you finish it, the security door from earlier to zone 115 is going to unlock. However, the other thing along with it is a temporary alarm is also going to initiate, which will spawn in a few regular strikers and shooters until you run back to that security door and initiate the full team scan. So as soon as you got everything from inside zone 114 you need, go to the terminal, put the command in, do the scan, and then run back into zone 108 as fast as you can, go to the northern end where you'll find that Apex door, then do the full team scan. And once you hear the music go away, you can then head into zone 115 itself. As for the zone, not really much in here. There will be some dialogue that plays that you can listen to, but there's no enemies or resources inside the zone. Just at the back end of it, you'll find a security door to zone 116, which is going to be a checkpoint scan. And inside zone 116, more enemies to deal with, more resources to collect, but more importantly, you'll find your very first bulkhead key, as well as the bulkhead door control and the doors to your main and secondary objective. Now, at this point, if you and your team are not interested in anything about the secondary objective and you just simply want to watch the guide portion for the main objective, go on ahead and jump to the timestamp that you see on screen. There, we'll continue to talk about zone 117 and how to finish the level. Everybody else though, we're going to be doing the secondary scan and heading over to the bulkhead door to zone 333. Now, before we can head into the secondary sector to see what our objective is, we're going to have to initiate the error alarm that's tied to the bulkhead door. That error alarm spawning in 5 enemies roughly every 35 seconds. And these enemies can consist of a mix of regular chargers, flyers, or even rarely sometimes giant chargers. But once you're good to go, you can do the scan. Once it finishes, open up the bulkhead and head inside. And upon heading into the zone, you're going to see that your secondary objective is to collect 10 GLP canisters, and there's actually a total of 12 of them. Specifically, there's going to be 3 GLPs per zone you have to make your way through. Now, what I like to do, because this error alarm will always spawn from behind you, is have one person on the team who has something like a hell rifle or maybe a high caliber or choke mod, just any gun that can very easily deal with chargers, stay behind the rest of the team and focus primarily on dealing with those enemies, because 5 enemies every 35 seconds really isn't all that difficult to deal with. As you can see in the background footage, I'm holding out with a hell rifle and it is incredibly easy for me to deal with even if I don't get multi-kills and line the chargers up. So one person is just going to be focusing on staying behind the team a little bit, dealing with the enemies as they spawn from behind, while the other 3 people will push into the zones, clearing out the enemies, most of the times just regular strikers and shooters, but there can also be a few giants here and there. And of course, they're going to go around, grab resources, resupply with them. If they come across ammo packs, might be a good idea to leave it behind for the defender, so when they make their way through there, they can pick it up and just resupply themselves. And of course, make sure you keep an eye out for the 3 GLPs that will be in the first zone and every zone afterwards. The only other thing I guess I really need to note in general about this sector is when you're progressing forward, make sure you let the defender person know. Because if you go too far away from that person, there is a good chance the wave will either spawn between you and the defender, or worst case, they'll actually spawn directly on top of the defender and very quickly kill them. So when you progress further into these rooms bit by bit, let that person know so they can also fall back and stay near you so that they're not too far away, but they're not too close that their gunshots will wake up the rooms you're about to head into. But as you make your way through bit by bit throughout zone 333, eventually get to the back end of zone 334 security door. This door is going to be a blood door. However, from my experience, it will only spawn in 4 or 5 regular chargers. So even without a mine, it's really easy to deal with. So open up the blood door whenever you're ready to, then they can head into that zone while the defender stays close behind. Zone 334 itself, there'll be 3 more GLPs to collect. This is a respawn zone, so anything you kill in here will come back later. And there'll also be a few fog repellers you can collect. Which the reason I mention this is because the next zone, zone 335, will have a fair amount of fog in it, so if you did not purify it earlier in the level, you're going to want to make sure you grab those fog repellers so you can more safely make your way through there. But just continue going through zone 334 just like you did 333. When you get to the back end of it, you will find the security door to 335, which will have a class 3 diminished alarm tied to it. And as you can see with this map overlay, there's only one possible spawn location for these enemies and only one door that leads into your room. So go on ahead, shut that door. Good chance you found an explosive trip mine up to this point, so feel free to shut the door and mine it. If you did not happen to find any explosive trip mines, then leave the door open and have your 3 sentries near the door facing out into the corridor, so it shoots enemies as they approach. Once you're good to go though, activate the alarm. It'll be pretty easy to deal with scans. It's a small room, so class 3 isn't all that big of a deal. And once you finish it, just deal with any of the enemies who are still left alive before you open up the security door, and then just continue on like normal. Zone 335 is going to have 3 more GLPs in it, more resources of course, and like I said, there will be a fair amount of fog towards the second half of it. And at the back end of the zone, you will find the security door to zone 336. This door is going to have a class 3 alarm tied to it as well, and like you can see with this map overlay, there are now 2 different possible spawn locations for enemies and a few different doors we can utilize. In all my runs at this point in the level, I have easily come across a lot of explosive trip mines, so what I like to do is have all 3 of the doors shut and mined, and then I'll place my sentries outside, not in the room with us because it's a pretty tiny room, and I'll just have them either facing towards the spawn points where the enemies come from, or facing towards the ladder they have to climb up to in order to get into our room. It's very important that you don't pull this alarm prematurely. I would highly recommend wait for a wave of chargers to spawn in, deal with them as quickly as you can, then get the door shut, mined, and then activate the alarm as soon as you possibly can. Now, once you finish this alarm, it is important. Make sure you kill all the enemies who are still left alive before you open up the security door, because once you open up zone 336's door, a tank will spawn in shortly afterwards that can either spawn from behind you or up ahead inside of that zone. But once you do open up the door, you're going to want to very quickly blast your way through the first room, deal with anything who is asleep in here, and look for your 10th and final GLP. Because ideally at this point you should have 9 out of 10, and once you find the 10th one and collect it, this will actually deactivate the error alarm, so all you have to deal with is anything nearby you that's still alive, as well as the tank that just spawned in. And once he is dead, you can then take all the time in the world to go through the rest of the zone to gather resources and deal with any of the enemies who are still left alive. And of course, also make sure you grab your second bulkhead key, as you're going to need that in order to progress further into the mission. Once you've gotten everything from 336 you need, go on ahead and backtrack all the way out of the sector. Of course, keep in mind, zone 334 is a respawn zone, so be cautious of that as you make your way through. But once you make your way back into zone 116, go over to the door control, plug the key in, do the scan for your main objective, and that will unlock the security door to zone 117. And at this point, it's time to continue on with the rest of the main objective. Okay, so the security door to zone 117. Once you've unlocked this door is just going to have a full team scan tied to it. And upon heading into the zone, you're going to see that this is a very big room. There are going to be a fair amount of resources in here, no enemies sleeping whatsoever. The terminal you need for your main objective, which is going to be an uplink terminal, will be in the middle of the room up above, and the lower portions of this room will have a fair amount of fog. So if you did not purify the fog at the beginning of the level, you're either going to need to use fog repellents to safely traverse down there, or you're going to have to take the fog turbine with you. But what you're going to want to do is just go throughout the zone, look for resources, and try to get an idea of where they are. And then when you go to the terminal in the middle of the room you need for the uplink, you're going to see that it is password locked, and the password is actually split between 4 different terminals. One of them inside zone 119, one of them in 120, one of them in 121, and the 4th one being in zone 122. Now, at this point, it is kind of a choose your own adventure because you don't actually have to go to all 4 of those terminals. If you can get 2 of the letters, you can more than likely guess what the password is because having 2 out of 4 letters makes it pretty easy. And there's a few different routes you can take, which personally, I always like going up to the northern security door, specifically to zone 120 and 121, but of course, this is a guide, so I have to cover every single one of them. So let's start off in just numerical order, heading over to the west to zone 118. This door is going to just simply be a full team scan, and inside of that zone is going to be a tank, a few chargers, as well as a few hybrids, and every single one of them will automatically wake up very shortly after you open up that security door. So once you do open it, stay outside, let all the enemies come to you, just deal with everything else before you focus on the tank, and once he's the last one alive, have some cover, shoot him from a distance, and it shouldn't be all that difficult to deal with him. Once he is dead, you can then head into the zone. Zone 118 isn't going to have anything in it, no resources, no terminal or anything. So just go to the back end where you'll find a security door to zone 119. This door being an open security door, no scan or anything tied to it. In zone 119 itself, there will be no enemies in here whatsoever. There will be resources to collect though, and there will be a terminal with one of your 4 letters. Then we can head up to the north to zone 120, which again, this is the route I like to take. This security door though is going to have an error alarm tied to it, this one spawning in 4 chargers roughly every 30 seconds, but you can deactivate this alarm by using the terminal inside zone 121. So when I go this way, I will do the scan tied to the security door 120, and then I hightail it as quickly as I can. Because zone 120 itself will have a little bit of fog in some of the rooms, no resources to collect whatsoever, and there is a terminal with a code on it, but I just run right past it because this zone doesn't have that many sleeping enemies inside of it, and my top priority is to get to 121 to deactivate that error alarm. The thing is though, the security door to 121, which is found at the far northern end of the zone, has a class 3 diminished alarm tied to it. And as you can see with this map overlay, there's only one possible spawn location for these enemies, and 2 different doors they're going to have to go through to get to you and your teammates. Which at this point, again, you should still have some explosive trip mines left over, even if you don't have a mine deployer. So go on ahead, shut both of those doors and mine them, and then just have your sentries somewhere in the room facing towards that door. So once they do break down the second one, they get into the room, your sentries will start shooting at them. Pretty easy to set up for this one, not that big of a deal whatsoever. So when you got everything set up and you activate the alarm and you finished it, just deal with any of the alarm enemies who are still left alive, pack up your sentries, open up the security door, and head into zone 121. Now inside of here, there will be a few enemies here and there. I do think sometimes you can get hybrids as well as giants, but overall it's not a ton of enemies, so it's not that big of a deal. Just go in, make your way to the left and go into the second room, and straight ahead of you, you will find the terminal that you can use to deactivate the error alarm. Once you do this, you can then just go throughout the rest of the zone, grabbing resources and dealing with the enemies, and of course make sure that on that terminal you deactivate the alarm from, you get a code, as that will have one of the 4 letters you need. Now, the security door to 122 is just simply a full team scan. This zone though is a bit dangerous because it is fairly large, quite a few different rooms to it, and throughout it, the only type of enemies you can expect to see are shadows, shadow giants, as well as a single shadow scout patrolling about, and there is going to be a lot of spitters in these rooms. Combine that with the fact that the zone is covered in pitch black darkness, and some of the zone does have a fair amount of fog in it, and it can be pretty annoying to make your way through here. And if you want the terminal for the letter, you're going to have to go all the way to the far eastern side because the terminal will always be in the very last room. But at this point, once you have gotten 2 or however many of the letters you need for that code, you could go back into 117, go to the terminal up above and unlock it, and now you'll have access to the uplink that's tied to the terminal. However, before we initiate it, we are going to want to set up our defenses because this uplink terminal will take a little while to complete and enemies will be spawning in throughout it. As you can see with this map overlay, majority of the enemies you deal with during this uplink are going to be chargers, although I've noticed every so often you can also get a few flyers here and there. Now in this map overlay, I have every single direction open up: the north, the east, the south, and the west. And this is actually the reason why I only like going up to the north and getting those 2 codes, because if you do that, you don't have to worry about the western spawn or the eastern spawn, which means you just have to have some people focus north and some people focus south, which is really easy to do when you have 3 defenders and 3 sentries. As for the doors out there though, I would say go on ahead, shut and mine any of the doors that you can. If you don't have leftover mines, no big deal, go on ahead, shut the doors anyway just to delay them. And then, as I mentioned, do a split. We have some people in one direction and others in the other direction. And of course, split your sentries however you see best fit. By the way, since I'm pretty sure I did not mention it yet, this uplink terminal will have a total of 10 codes tied to it. So you will be defending for a little while, but if you've been playing well up to this point, you should have plenty of resources to be able to last for all 10 of the codes. But you're just going to work on the codes one by one, and once you put in the 10th and final code, you can very quickly pack up your sentries and start right back towards the beginning of the level, because once that is finished, an extraction alarm is going to initiate. You're going to hear a little bit of dialogue from Schaefer, although more often than not, it's going to get cut off. But you're just going to want to run as quickly as you can, because waves of strikers and shooters are going to just keep spawning in over and over again. Run down south until you get all the way back into zone 108 at the beginning, where your extraction scan will be, and once you get there, hop onto the scan, place down your sentries, and get ready to hold out for a little bit. Once you get that scan all the way to 100%, you are done and you have completed R8B3. And that's all there is to it. R8B3 gives me the feeling of an old classic GTFO level. A little bit of story, but not too much in it. Some choices throughout the level that make it so you could play different ways depending on your preferences, and a simple collect objective for our secondary. Something about the level that really stood out to me though, is it gives me a new perspective on the first half of Rundown 8. Now, I'm not going to go into too many details here because it would take me a little while to explain what I'm talking about, but I will say that the flow of time in Rundown 8 might not be as crystal clear as it looks on the surface. As always though, thank you for watching this video all the way to the very end. I do hope that I was able to provide you with some assistance in beating this mission. If you have any tips or tricks to this level that you want to share, any questions from me, or you just have something in general that you'd like to say, please do let me know down in the comments. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me, and if you want to join my community, there's a link to my Discord down in the description, as well as some other links you might be interested in. Among those links being one to the official GTFO merch store, which, as always, I highly recommend you check out if you're a fellow GTFO enthusiast and you're looking to pick up some sweet merch. Until next time, up next is the level that I've heard a lot of people say they can't wait to see how I recommend people going about completing it, and honestly, I'm still not entirely certain what I'm actually going to be saying in that level guide, but hopefully, I'll see all you wonderful people in the next video.